Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me. I'm here with a replay of a modern friendly league. This is the first round, and I lost the die roll. The opponent's going to be on the play, and let's have a look at the opening hand. So this is excellent. Depending on what the opponent does, we can open on turn 2 with Lord of Atlantis or Spreading Seas. We have a chance to draw into a Cursecatcher and AEther Vial to play on turn 1. But good value in our cards. If we hit a couple lands, we'll be able to cast Master of Waves. I got some interaction with Echoing Truth. Very nice, well-rounded hand. So easy keep for us. Let's see if the opponent kept his 7. Looks like he did. Polluted Delta. They're going to crack it right away. Looks like an untapped Watery Grave into an Inquisition of Kozilek. I imagine they're probably going to take one of my Lords away, kind of reduce the power of the hand. A lot of times when decks cast Inquisition, they'll take away our Spreading Seas, but since this deck is already playing blue, they're not as concerned with it as, say, Jund or Abzan might be. So, expecting them to take a Lord, and they did in fact. They took Master of the Pearl Trident. So at this point, I'm assuming it's some kind of Grixis deck. Not quite sure, though, based on the limited information we have. Drew into a third land, which, as I mentioned, is decent for eventually casting Master of Waves. I'm just going to play one of the lands the opponent knows about and pass the turn back since I have no 1-drops. Okay, opponent's going to start with Thought Scour, which again sort of leads me to think that he's playing some sort of Grixis build now. Definitely something with like Tasigur or Gurmag Angler, trying to fill up the graveyard as quickly as possible. So we see a Gurmag Angler getting put in the graveyard. And there's also a Death Shadow. So this is some sort of blue-black Death Shadow deck. So Death Shadow has, for a long time now, been a pretty strong deck in Modern. For the longest time, it was called Suicide Zoo, or Suicide, or Death Shadow Aggro. But now, with so many people building different color variations involving Death Shadow, normally you just get sort of a color name and Death and Shadow or whatever. So this is some sort of blue-black Shadow deck. We don't know if it's Grixis, could be, I guess, blue, black, green, which, man, is Sultai, could be Esper. But yeah, there are a ton of people having a lot of success with Death Shadow decks right now, so I guess I'm not too surprised to see this guy. Let's see if the opponent has a land drop for the turn. They do. Untapped Hallowed Fountain, following up with a Serum Visions. So we can open the chat here and see what the opponent did with that Serum Visions. Puts a card on the bottom, puts a card on the top. So splitting the difference with Serum Visions. And close that chat again. And that's it for his turn. Okay, well, drew that 4th land, so we'll be able to get to Master of Waves for sure. Do you guys want to play the Lord of Atlantis here? Or do you want to play Spreading Seas? Like, what's the thought process? For me, I actually strongly prefer to play the Spreading Seas. The deck looks like most of the action in it is going to be in black. White is probably in the deck for things like Apostle's Blessing, maybe Path to Exile, and sideboard cards. Rest in Peace, Stony Silence, Worship, those kinds of things. So if we can slow the opponent down on his access to black mana right now, it's going to be probably pretty useful moving forward in the game. Another consideration is that if we jam the Lord of Atlantis right now, with 6 cards in hand next turn, this type of deck almost certainly has at this point either a Path or a Fatal Push or some sort of removal spell that would just pick my Lord of Atlantis right off. So probably better go with Spreading Seas, take him off black mana, draw an extra card, give us more information about what to do in the coming turns. So play the other land that he knew about already, Cavern of Souls naming Merfolk, and follow up with the Spreading Seas here. Drew into an island, so at least we get to draw through that. Hopefully our draw step at the beginning of next turn will give us some more gas. Has a fetch land to get black mana reestablished. It's a Godless Shrine. Opponent now at 12 life, they can cast a Death Shadow without it immediately dying, and looks like that's what they're choosing to do. So the opponent now with a 1/1 Death Shadow on the board. And they just pass the turn. And so I drew a Kira, which actually totally validates the line that I took last turn. If I had played out the Lord and he got picked off with a Path to Exile while the opponent had me tapped out, The opponent, I guess, would have had a really efficient turn, killing my creature and playing out his, but as it was, the opponent now only has access to 1 black mana, no removal on our turn. They could have counter magic up, but between the couple of strategies they have going on with Death Shadow and sort of the Tasigur route, I don't think they're running a lot of counter magic. So I'm gonna play Kira out into the face of this open mana. I'm not too afraid. Yeah, and she resolved. It's possible the opponent was leaving mana up for removal. It's possible they have a handful of black spells. So let's see if they have anything on end step or anything. Nope, so just a pretty inefficient turn for the opponent. Okay, so this turn, tapping all their mana and looks like exiling some cards from the graveyard to get Tasigur on the board. Let's keep going here. Opponent didn't attack. Death Shadow is just a 1/1. They have no more lands, apparently. And they're just sitting here with four cards in hand. Drew a Vapor Snag. It's going to be useful to slow down there and sort of hopefully catch them off guard in their attacking plan. Kira's great because even if we lose access to Island Walk, she's going to be able to keep chipping in, getting us closer to lethal damage. So this turn, what do you guys do? Do you just jam Master of Waves? It seems like a strong option. We would get 4 tokens. Kira gets to keep attacking. We'd have plenty of blockers if we need them, though I'm not really afraid for my life total right now. Next turn, we would have a Lord with bounce spells backing him up. I don't know. For this turn, I thought that playing the Lord of Atlantis was the better option. We're not under a ton of pressure, and we would have more devotion established for when we do play the Master of Waves. And this turn, we can leave up mana for those bounce spells. So here's the Lord of Atlantis. Just swing with Kira for 2. Sometimes you need to be careful against Death Shadow decks, hitting their life total, because it obviously makes the Death Shadow bigger. But in this game in particular, and in general against these blue-based creature decks, we're typically the beatdown just because we have access to Island Walk. In this case, I just have a flyer, but evasion is evasion. Opponent goes down to 10, and that's all I'm going to do for my turn. So with Death Shadow as a 3/3 now, they're going to attack with both creatures, and I'm going to choose to bounce the Tasigur. I'm actually going to opt for the Echoing Truth here, just because next turn, if I play my 5th land, I can play Master of Waves and leave up Vapor Snag. I'm going to bounce Tasigur because it's a greater mana investment for the opponent. This guy costs 6. So better to bounce that guy and make it more difficult for the opponent to redeploy. As you saw last turn when they played Tasigur, they tapped all of their mana down, and that's where we want the opponent to be, tapped out. So Tasigur effectively bounced. This Death Shadow is just going to hit me for 3 down to 17. And it looks like the opponent still doesn't have another land drop, so this Spreading Seas is doing good work, keeping our opponent to only 1 black mana per turn. Here's a second Death Shadow, so I could have gotten potentially more value out of the Echoing Truth by bouncing these 2 guys, but in this particular case, I think bouncing the Tasigur is still correct. We have the opponent backed up on black mana, and Death Shadow still only costs 1 to cast, so if at any point he draws another black source, he can just replay these 2 guys like nothing. Tasigur does cost 6. And these 2 3/3s aren't super scary. So I continue drawing lands. I think I'm going to Vapor Snag this Death Shadow right now to sort of just clear the path for my attack. So I went straight to combat and was a little bit hasty here. Just turned my guys sideways. And as soon as the opponent started tapping mana with Kira on the board, I just realized he's almost certainly going to play a Snapcaster. Now, as it stands, it's not terrible. He's not going to get any value out of the Snapcaster beyond trading for my 2-drop. So 2-drop trading for 2-drop, not too bad. Don't feel terrible about that. He's not going to get to flash back an Inquisition or Thought Scour or anything else with Snapcasters. So the only downside is that I'm going to get fewer tokens with Master of Waves. But in the end, I'm pretty far ahead in this game, and trading with Snapcaster Mage doesn't feel too bad. So traded with Snapcaster. Sorry, kind of rushed through some of that. And follow up with the Master of Waves, get the 4 tokens. Opponent's still not doing great with their mana. Plays out a second Death Shadow, 2 6/6s, plays a Godless Shrine tapped. We usually feel great when the Death Shadow deck plays its Shocklands tapped. It means that they're afraid for their life total. And as we can see, I pretty much all I have to do is just turn my guy sideways to win here. So second Master of Waves just makes it that much more lethal because all my elemental tokens are going to become 3/2s. So second Master of Waves hits the board. All the elementals get bigger, and I can just easily attack around the guy's 2 Death Shadows. It's possible he has something like Blessed Alliance, which could force me to sacrifice an attacker. In that case, I could sacrifice one of my elementals. He blocks 2 of them. He'd still take 2, 2, 2. Well, that could have been pretty rough if I didn't have the second Master of Waves, because if I was attacking with 4 2/2s, a 2/1 and a 2/2, he could have made me sacrifice one of my elementals, block the Master of Waves, and then he would only take 6. He'd be left with 2 12/12s, which could attack for lethal. But I probably wouldn't have Alpha Strike with this open mana if I didn't draw into something good. I could have drawn into an Island Walk Lord, which would have assured that I was going to push through with the 2 flying and 3 Island Walk damage with Kira protecting me. But as it stands, I've got an army of 3/2 elementals, and there's pretty much nothing the opponent can have, short of Fog, I guess. So the opponent scooped it up there. Pretty strong game 1. Seems like Merfolk has a good matchup against this Grixis build. And we'll see how game 2 went. The opponent's going to be on the play again. So another very solid opening hand. We don't have Kira here, but we do have Cursecatchers to help us protect our other creatures from whatever removal spells the opponent might be playing. Also out of the sideboard, they might bring in some sort of Wrath effects, whether Wrath of God or Damnation or Supreme Verdict, any of those things. Well, Cursecatcher doesn't help against Supreme Verdict, but it helps against the other spells. Cursecatcher is not the best when we're on the draw because the opponent's always a little bit ahead of us in mana, assuming that they hit their land drops. But it's still an aggressive card, especially in combination with these 2 Island Walk Lords. Opponent goes immediately down to 18, and we see a Serum Visions. We can again open up the chat and see what he did with that. So we see bottom top again, splitting the difference. And for my turn, let's see, I draw another Island Walk Lord. A little backed up on mana, but jamming Island Walk Lords against decks that have islands is typically a recipe for success. Alright, so the opponent's thoughts using me. I can't really counter that with the Cursecatcher. Well, he lost pretty hard to Master of Waves last game, so he might take the Master of Waves, but he could easily take one of my Island Walk Lords as well, especially since I'm backed up on mana. I would guess he's probably, like, the best choice is one of the Island Walk Lords here. And that's what the opponent went with. Following up with a Cycled Street Wraith, costing him 2 life after the 2 life on the Thoughtseize. Another life from the Flooded Strand, 2 more life from the Godless Shrine, and I can't help but think that we're going to see Death Shadow here. Alright, so the opponent had 11 life and he has a 2/2 on the board. Strong stuff. Drew right back into that 3rd Island Walk Lord. A pretty obvious play here. We're going to jam our first Island Walk Lord and swing for 2 with Cursecatcher. As I mentioned last game, when we have Island Walk, we're the beatdown. It doesn't really matter what the opponent's doing. So go ahead and make this Death Shadow a little bit bigger. Not really afraid of that guy. Cracks at Polluted Delta. He's already at 8 life. Now this is, let's see, a Thought Scour. What hit the yard? I think this is the first white spell that we've seen in this Esper deck. So Path to Exile. We could have assumed safely that he had some of those in the deck. Alright, following up with the Thoughtseize. Now this is kind of funny because at this point, after the last Thoughtseize, the opponent knew that I had 1 Island Walk Lord. If he could have stripped that out of my hand, he would have been left with a 5/5 in hand. Sorry, on the board. Would have been sitting at 6 life, and he could at least prevent me from attacking with the Lord of Atlantis and continue to develop his board, his mana, and potentially remove some of my creatures. But as it stands, I drew into another Island Walk Lord, so casting this Thoughtseize, he's going to go down to 6, and then next turn if I play out an Island Walk Lord, I can swing for 6 unblockable. Unless he has removal in hand, which I would sacrifice the Cursecatcher to counter, I'd be swinging just for 3. But I'd still have 2 lords on the board. So the opponent sees the 2 lords and just chose to scoop at that point. So the rare turn 3 win for Merfolk. It doesn't happen often, really only when the opponent takes themselves all the way down to 6. So as I mentioned, it looks like Merfolk has a really strong matchup against this particular Death Shadow build, Esper. I think we also do pretty well against the Grixis build, just because we have pretty consistent access to Island Walk. We can bring in Dispels and Negates from the sideboard, which I did, and you can also bring in Relic of Progenitus, taking some of the graveyard out of the equation, makes it harder to cast Tassigers, harder to cast Gurmag Anglers, harder to get value out of Snapcaster Mage. So yeah, it looks like we have a lot of game against these blue-based Death Shadow decks. Let me know your guys' thoughts on the matchup. Let me know your thoughts on how I played, if you would have done anything differently. Maybe that attack with the Lord of Atlantis into the Ambush Viper wasn't the best advised. In the end, I don't think it made a big difference. But that was round 1. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Leave your comments and tune in for the next video, which will have me playing round 2. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.